That's an indirect vote. You're voting for a slate of electors in your state. Today is the day that those electors will confirm the outcome of the election, was that Donald Trump won the Electoral College. 538 members of that college are going to meet to officially cast their ballots. They do it in your home state. Everybody's in their own states. Remember, you need 270 to win the presidency, and now today we'll see. However, one Texas elector came out publicly and saying, I'm not going to cast my vote for Donald Trump. He has faced major backlash ever since. CNN's Kyung La spoke with him. She's live in Austin. There's a lot of intrigue around today. The outcome is probably foregone, but this guy's paying a price for his faithlessness.
A very heavy price, and let's remember why, because he is the only Republican elector in the country who has publicly said that he'll flip, that he won't vote for Donald Trump. 37 of them, those Republican electors, are needed to flip in order to send it to the House of Representatives. You say it's a foregone conclusion. They say it might be possible, but what it has meant for this man, innumerable death threats against him, his wife, and his children. He will be taking that vote today. He'll be doing so with security. The threats keep coming to Christopher Supran, from raping his wife and daughters with a knife before killing him, to warnings on social media, to messages on his cell phone.
You better get your straight. We coming after you.
People have put out my home address. They put out my home phone number. We're now in a place where, oh, you're not going to vote the way I want? I'm going to kill you.
All because Supran is a Republican Texas elector in the Electoral College. He's a so-called faithless elector. The conservative, lifelong Republican will not vote for Donald Trump, even though the GOP easily won Texas. Why not vote for Donald Trump? I mean, isn't that what you're supposed to do?
If I'm a rubber stamp, that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. This is unfortunately the first time I think we've needed to use it as a nation, but it's time to pull the brake.
He claims that goal of stopping Trump has made him the target of a smear campaign. Supran says he was a Dale City, Virginia volunteer paramedic at the Pentagon on 9/11. He says Trump supporters are alleging he was never there, a claim he calls outrageous. The Dale City Fire Department says Supran was a volunteer member from 2000 to 2002, but can't find a record of where he was on 9/11.
These electors are charged with constitutional responsibility.
The electoral vote is something we usually never pay attention to. But 2016 has been anything but usual.
Bottom line, he hasn't won yet. The only vote that matters when it comes to president has not happened yet.
Brett Chiafalo, Democratic Washington State elector, formed the Hamilton Electors the day after the election, now trying to urge Electoral College members across the country to block Trump from 270 votes. For that to happen, 37 Republican electors must flip. Supran is the first Republican to publicly flip, but Chiafalo says he's heard from others.
We believe that there's a large group of people who are staying silent out of fear, or maybe because they haven't made a final decision. But we do believe there's dozens of Republican electors who are seriously considering not voting for Donald Trump.
The tellers will announce the votes.
But even if that remote possibility happens, the House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans, elects the president. He's still going to win.
He's still going to win.
So isn't this all pointless then?
Not if you're trying to vote your conscience, not if you're trying to do the right thing and bring up the issue. I've been hoping he would become the president we all want him to be. He keeps proving me wrong.
As Supran arrives here at the Texas State Capitol in several hours, he will be greeted by protesters, those protesters urging the other electors here in Texas and at other state capitals, Chris and Allison, to vote against Trump. Chris, Allison?
Important point. They all get together in their own states. The college doesn't all get together in one place, so less lobbying to take place. He's in Texas. I don't think that's one of the 28 states where you have to vote the party's outcome, so he has a little bit more leeway. But the idea that today changes anything, very, very remote. Let's discuss the Electoral College vote and the future issues facing President-elect Trump with CNN senior political commentator David Axelrod. You see what happening today?
Well, I think Donald Trump will get the electoral votes that he needs. I don't think very many electors are going to switch. Because I listen to that poor guy and I'm thinking, boy, this was an honorific position really until now, and this guy's getting death threats for changing his position. Look, Alexander Hamilton conceived of the Electoral College and the Founding Fathers as a buffer against democracy run amok, as a safeguard against someone who was unsuited for the office to take the office, but it's never been used in the history of our republic. There have been a few electors who have not voted for the candidate who won their states, but that's been very rare. To have it happen now, despite the fact that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and all that's swirling around with Russia and so on, I believe would split the country apart in a really destructive way, and it would set this mad cycle in which every election the Electoral College vote would be in question. So I think it probably should end up the way it's going to end up today.
I mean, but you're saying that you think that they should fall in line, but what about Supron there, who says, I have to vote my conscience. I can't live with myself if I won't. We don't know that there's more than he that feels that way, though. You heard the Democratic elector say, we've heard there are dozens of Republican electors who feel that way, but we don't have any evidence.
Even if they got it down from 270, it still goes to the House of Representatives.
Right. So they're not the final buffer.
Right, but part of voting your conscience is thinking about what that vote might mean for the country. And look, I have some grave reservations about Donald Trump. I have real concerns about some of the things that happened in that election. But thinking about what this country would be like if there was an attempt to actually overturn the result would be, to me, very, very destructive. And so, yes, I understand the and I respect that gentleman for voting his conscience, but I do think part of that conscience vote has to be the impact on the country.
Right. Let's talk about conscience for a second. The Electoral College stuff is intriguing on an intellectual level. If you really care about this, go Google James Madison and his arguments about what our election should be. Hamilton gets all the credit. But look up Madison, because he had just as much to say about it. So let me ask you about this in terms of conscience acts. The conscience is what feeds into the ethical standard about conflicts of interest. It's not as much about the law as it is about ethics and conscience. You have been tweeting and thinking a lot about this. What do you believe is incumbent upon the next president of the United States to do in terms of conflicts of interest?
Well, we had this big debate during the campaign about the candidates releasing their tax returns, and it's kind of an ephemeral debate in some ways until it becomes real. Now we have this issue of Russia and its role in the election and whether they tried to tilt the election to Donald Trump. And you have, alongside that, reports, and there was another in USA Today this weekend, about his business dealings in Russia, which apparently are extensive, including financing of some of his projects, if this report is true. We don't know if that's the case. We have no idea what his financial questions, which is why presidents for the last 4 decades have released their tax returns so people understood exactly what their finances were and where their conflicts might be. The fact that Donald Trump refuses to do that, and I don't think we're ever going to see his tax returns, is deeply disturbing. He's got global entanglements. We know that. Dealings all over the world, and we don't know where his financing comes from, what his obligations and entanglements are, to make judgments as to whether he is making decisions on the basis of the national interest or his own pecuniary interest.
So, David,
and that's very disturbing.
I mean, but David, you've heard the Trump campaign, Trump team, sowing of doubt that the Russians were behind the hacking. They don't believe it, and we just had Vladimir Posner, veteran Russian journalist, on, who said the CIA should prove it. We're not just going to take them at their word. They should produce the evidence. Does the CIA ever produce evidence to show exactly how they connect the dots?
No, because to do so would be to expose their means and their operatives, and would undermine our ability to gather intelligence. But look, 16 intelligence agencies and the FBI have all agreed that this happened. first of all. I don't think there's any question in the minds of our intelligence agencies or most members of Congress who've seen the intelligence that the hacking actually occurred. And they've further suggested that it was to help Mr. Trump. But even if it wasn't to help Trump, it's still a huge encroachment on our electoral process, a deep source of concern. And that should be a concern for Republicans and Democrats. I don't think the Trump folks are doing him a favor by continually pushing back against this. So they stand with Vladimir Posner on this question. I'm not sure that's going to rally the country in the corner of the president-elect. They should be for a full and complete investigation of this, and if they're not, then people need to understand why they're not.
Axe, do you think that there winds up being an accommodation of this need for disclosure by Trump? Because everybody keeps running up against the same wall. Is there any chance that you see what you're seeing right now with Russia when it comes to Trump, that you have a bipartisan, sealed congressional committee hearing, which is what they're asking for, what Nunes wanted with Clapper, right? You know, the headlines ignore that Clapper says he tried to get Nunes 3 times. But the outside is, we're going to have a confidential hearing. Trump has to come with his guys, put out his taxes, let us review them, bipartisan, so that Congress can have confidence, and then you try and put in some penalties against leaking, because it's a classified hearing, so that they don't leak out any of his information. So then at least you have the people who need to know most about the conflicts know. Any chance of that?
Well, that would be great, and that would be good for the country, Chris. One of the tests for the Republican leadership in Congress now is, will they insist on such an investigation? They've said they're for an investigation, but they've sort of hinted that it would be a limited investigation, not the select committee that John McCain, for example, and some others have called for. This should be fully aired, and even as you suggest, if it is done in part in private and in secret, and the members get to examine evidence that the public can't. I think it almost necessarily has to be that way. There should be a full investigation. This has cast a huge cloud over this incoming administration, and it's going to cast a cloud over every decision that's made relative to Russia unless there is a full and complete probe and a conclusion. And so, you know, this is a big test, not just for the president, but for the Congress.
Yeah. David Axelrod, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Okay, guys, have a good day.
You too. President-elect Trump making a controversial choice for Israeli ambassador to Israel. What implication could this have on the entire Middle East? We discuss that next.